welcome back to the third annual Halloween special. I'm here to collaborate once again with these amazing guys, Austin and Ethan. And here to talk about Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. Once again, directed by Sam Raimi. And good lord, this film is amazing. And even by today's standards, even though, there are some things about the film that is obviously dated, but still, this film has its cult following. Because, this is basically not only the film that made the series so beloved by horror fans, but it's also really what made the character of Ash Williams into a pop culture hero. And if you watched either the first film or Army of Darkness or Ash vs. Evil Dead, you kind of know the feeling of the Evil Dead series. And now when it comes to mostly Evil Dead 2, it's mostly considered by many to be the best of the series. Sure, there are fans of each movie because when you watch the first Evil Dead, it's just a full-fledged out horror film, while Evil Dead 2 has the perfect blend of both comedy and horror, and that's really what makes the film work so well. And Sam Raimi's work on this film, like I mentioned in our review for the original Evil Dead, I've been a huge fan of Sam Raimi's work ever since his work on the original Spider-Man trilogy, which I still love to this day, even though I do have problems with Spider-Man 3. Still, I've been a huge fan of Sam Raimi's work, and Evil Dead is right up my alley, especially when it comes to horror films. And I'm pretty sure you guys would say the same thing, because mostly I'm pretty sure we have a lot of respect for Sam Raimi's work.
Yep.
Yeah, because
ever since Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, even though, it was mostly aimed towards kids. If you watch the hospital scene in Spider-Man 2, right when Doc Ock goes on, unleashes his wrath on the hospital staff, yeah, it definitely has some Evil Dead vibes, especially the
yes.
one doctor using the chainsaw. Sure, it does bring out its horror elements.
Yeah, I do love that scene because it's very different for the superhero genre.
Yeah, because sure, Sam Raimi, before he did the Spider-Man trilogy, had his work on Darkman, and like I mentioned also in our review for Evil Dead, I think that Darkman is his most underrated film.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and mostly Evil Dead 2, for me, it's mostly I mostly consider Evil Dead 2 the best of the series, mostly because of its mix of both comedy and horror, and mostly because of Bruce Campbell's performance, because I love Bruce Campbell in this series, and honestly, it's hard to picture him as anybody else than Ash Williams, because you can't really picture him as anybody else than Ash Williams, honestly.
He owns his role.
Because, even if you, put him in a certain type of role in a different film, still, it's Bruce Campbell, but, I'm pretty sure a lot of us really like to associate him with Ash Williams, because, honestly, I cannot picture anybody else playing that character like Bruce Campbell did, because when it comes to Bruce Campbell, man, did he not get us out of the park. Sure, I did think his performance in the first film was good, but it was acceptable because, he's not really the Ash that we know and love, because it's really in Evil Dead 2 that he really becomes the Ash that we know and love.
Yep, where he gets that chainsaw.
Yeah, because that montage where he's gearing up and arming himself with his chainsaw arm, that's easily the best scene in the movie.
Groovy.
Oh, yeah. Groovy. And also, one other performance that I also love other than Bruce Campbell is Ted Raimi as the possessed Henrietta. It's, not only that, but also the makeup work and the cinematography is something that needs to be praised, especially the makeup work, because the makeup team who did this for the film also handled a lot of makeup work on The Walking Dead, because mostly when it comes to this, I mean, obviously this had a much higher budget compared to the first film, which had like something between $400,000, while this had over $3 million, and you could tell that they kind of like they upped the budget and they were more prepared compared to how they were in the first film. And mostly, I mean, sure, I mean, the series is not immune to its level of controversy. I mean, sure, I mean, the film and the first film got a whole lot of flack because of the intense level of violence. While the second film didn't really receive that much criticism for its level of violence, because, I mean, sure, there are moments where it can get bloody and everything. I mean, it's not as gory, like super gory compared to the first film, but it does have its moments, because especially the one scene where Henrietta pulls Jake and he tries to save him, and she's just like completely covered in blood, and there's just like this whole fountain just pouring all over her, and it's just like, oh, and you're like, holy shit! It's just like the effects in these movies. I mean, they still look amazing, especially with the stop motion, which is something that's not really used in film anymore, because obviously, like a lot of big blockbuster films, when most of they would mostly use CG, and mostly, I mean, I'm okay with CGI in certain movies, but when you use it as a tool, it will work, and not just for your entire film. I just think, I mean, I do respect like older films just doing what they can to make an entertaining movie, and Evil Dead is definitely the type of film that does its best to be entertaining, because I mean, it's really what Sam Raimi does best. And I mean, this is easily one of my top 2 favorite Sam Raimi films, and I just really love Evil Dead. And I mean, well, I love this entire franchise as a whole, but mostly when it comes to Evil Dead 2, it's the best in the series. And I mean, all 3 of us, we have plenty of things to say about this film, and we're gonna go over it in spoiler form in case I am not making this pretty more clear. But before we get in depth, I want to have you two share your personal thoughts on the film. What about you, Austin?
Well, I love the film for its amazing camera work. It's awesome makeup. It's also stop motion and practical effects. And it has that perfect blend of comedy and horror.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that really works. I mean, and mostly when most filmmakers try to do that, it's almost like they don't really know how to do it that well. But mostly Sam Raimi accomplishes it perfectly, and I really respect him for that, because most filmmakers they view it as a sort of risk, but Sam Raimi likes to take that risk, and I respect him for that, because I mean, I think he's a really talented filmmaker, and
he is very underrated.
Yeah, very underrated. But mostly, I mean, despite that, I mean, he's gained a lot of respect mostly because of his work on the original Spider-Man trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what got him on the map, on the brighter broad.
Yeah, but Evil Dead 2 came out before he did the Spider-Man trilogy, so he did have his moments. So, what do you think overall, Ethan?
Yeah, I think Evil Dead 2 is what really kind of built the foundation for the Sam Raimi films, because you can see it kind of transitioned over in the Spider-Man films. You know, in certain camera work and cinematography, it really shows the evolution of where he started and how he evolved, and I think that's the best testament to Sam Raimi. He really knows how to not only take risks, but to just give everything he's got in his films. That's really that's why he's really special, to me.
Yeah.
As a director.
Yeah, I really do think so too, because mostly the camera work in this film. I mean, let's talk about that one continuous shot where Ash is going into the cabin and trying to escape from the evil force. I mean, he goes from room to room. I mean, the camera work is a bit shaky, but I do not care. I just love that one shot. It keeps going for at least almost 2 minutes.
Yeah,
it's just like it never stops. It's just like, and
that's amazing for the 80s.
Yeah, especially from the 80s. I'm surprised that the film didn't even receive any Academy Award nominations
for its best makeup, for its best cinematography, practical effects.
Yeah, I mean,
none of those.
I'm just like, why?
Wow, I'm shocked.
Yeah.
Dang you, critics.
Well, I mean,
for this film,
but critics still praised Evil Dead 2. I mean, even I'm surprised that Roger Ebert even loved Evil Dead 2, because I mean, I think that he disliked the first one mostly because of how violent it was.
I'm surprised he didn't like that one.
Yeah, but and a lot of critics back at the time, mostly for Army of Darkness, complained about it having too much comedy. So how the film is different compared to the first one is mostly its tone, but mostly how, I mean, they spend the first few minutes basically remaking the events of the first film. It kind of like retcons things a bit.
Yeah.
Because
it does.
I mean, when in the first film, it's mostly just 5 people in a cabin in the woods, and they limit it to just a single couple.
Yeah.
Mostly with Ash and Linda.
Right. I'm just like, how is Cheryl canon in the show?
Yeah. And
if they completely retcon the first film and the second film.
But they do make Evil Dead 1 and 2 canon, and eventually, if you watch this second season of Ash vs. Evil Dead, and you watch the beginning of the first episode of Ash vs. Evil Dead in the first season, they do show clips of both Evil Dead 1 and 2, but not really any clips from Army of Darkness, because, I mean, I'm pretty sure that a lot of fans can just edit, like, certain clips to just try to make the entire franchise canon, but...
Sam, screw you, Universal. We're not letting them to do that.
Yeah, because Universal own the rights for Army of Darkness. And mostly how it's like... and also Denise Bixler, who played Linda. I mean, she replaced Betsy Baker, who played Linda in the original. Mostly because Betsy Baker at the time was pregnant, and so they eventually had to recast her.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah, but I think I like Denise Bixler more than Betsy Baker, even though I think Betsy Baker in the original, I mean, I did like her performance, although it was a bit over the top. I mean, I do like the creepy moment that I do like her laugh, I think it was... I liked it for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And she does the creepy, we're gonna get you, we're gonna get you, na-na-na, beep. I mean, you all probably know the rest if you have seen the original, but eventually, I mean, just like in the original, she gets possessed and Ash is forced to kill her, but, I mean, he decapitates her with a shovel, and you'd think that would be it, but no.
No.
We'll get to that later, and it picks up right where the first one left off, where the evil force hits Ash and sends him flying
for miles.
I wouldn't go so far as to say miles, but it's at least like a few thousand feet to God knows where. Yeah. And he eventually gets possessed, which is something that you'd never really truly expected, but. Originally, they never really intended to make a sequel because mostly it was just meant to kill everybody off, but mostly because Sam Raimi was kind of like, I mean, originally, because of his film Crime Wave, which he did before Evil Dead 2, bombed horribly at the box office. I mean, they thought that the best way that they can regain faith in the film industry was to make Evil Dead 2. So, Dino De Laurentiis, who was a friend of Stephen King's, Stephen King held no finance Evil Dead 2 because Stephen King was a huge fan of the original and was desperate to see the sequel. So, it kind of makes sense that Stephen King would love Evil Dead because we're huge Stephen King fans and we're huge fans of horror, so it's right up our alley.
Yes, I love Stephen King.
Yeah, I can't imagine anybody not loving Stephen King.
I know.
But
my top 2 favorite films from him are The Shining and Misery.
And mostly when it comes to his non-horror, of course, we all love Shank Redemption. Then so anyway, back to the plot. So even though Ash does get possessed, I mean, just like for a short minute, I mean, he eventually turns back to normal because of the sunlight. I mean, I guess it's has like a vampire effect, except not like turning into ash or anything. It just, I mean, the
reverts it back to normal. Yeah, the evil force leaves his body or something like that.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess evil doesn't like the sunlight.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. But mostly, so he tries to escape, but the bridge has been destroyed. I forgot to mention and that about how that happened in the original. It's just like they don't want them to leave.
No.
Just...
It also happened in the original movie.
So in the scene where Linda comes back to life, I mean, the stop motion used it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And almost looks something
hilariously good.
Yeah, it almost looks like something you would see in A Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah. Film. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And,
it's hilarious.
Yeah, and so she comes back, she bites Ash's hand, so he's forced to kill her again, this time by sawing her head in half with a chainsaw, and in case that wasn't enough, his hand eventually gets possessed.
Yes.
Which I would argue, I thought those were some of the best sequences in the movie, him fighting against his hand.
His hand.
Yeah, I
love this.
Yeah, so...
Some of the most hilarious stuff in the whole movie.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, and this was Bruce Campbell doing his own stunts, and he deserves praise for that scene.
Yeah.
Eventually, he's had enough of that bullshit, and he ends up cutting off his own hand with a chainsaw.
His favorite hand. Right hand, yeah.
Yeah, and I like how... And if you watch the finale, of the second season of Ash vs. Evil Dead, he mentioned how much he loved his right hand. He's like, "Oh, my virgin hand, and it hasn't even held a beer." Yeah. Bruce Campbell, you're the best, and I love you. And as when it comes to the supporting characters, I don't really mind them all that much. Sarah Berry as Annie, I think she does what she can do, given what she is given, because mostly, I mean, she's not really, I mean, sure, she has her moments where she can scream, which kind of can get a little bit annoying, but mostly, I mean, I think that's secretly Sam Raimi has a fetish for screaming women.
If you watch the Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, especially with Kirsten Dunst screaming in most of those movies.
In all 3 of those movies.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, we begin to wonder, Sam Raimi, is that your thing? Screaming women? And Ted Raimi as the possessed Henrietta, I think he is just good. God, I mean, I mean, he was working his ass off. I mean, especially having to wear that suit is just. And apparently, for what I've seen on the behind the scenes footage, he did not have a good time with that suit.
No.
And
he didn't look like it.
Yeah, and despite that, he decided to reprise his role in Ash vs. Evil Dead. I mean,
it's surprising.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people would finally remember him playing Hoffman, who was J. Jonah Jameson's assistant in the Spider-Man trilogy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Then and also Dan Hicks, who played Jake. I mean, he was fine. I mean, even though his one decision to just go outside to find his girlfriend, who before then she runs outside, then eventually gets attacked by the demonic trees. I mean, they don't repeat the same tree rape scene in the original because Sam Raimi regretted putting that scene because, and you could tell that it was tamed because, I mean, most of the film does feel a bit tamed because while the first film was overly violent, I mean, at first, especially the scene where Ash kills one Deadite and you can see like green blood just squirting out everywhere, and you're like, what? I mean, it was Sam Raimi's attempt to get an R rating, but the film was released uncut with no rating, which kind of really doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
No.
I mean, they were mostly trying to avoid the NC-17 rating, which kind of does make sense.
But green blood.
Yeah, and the way that Jake gets killed by the possessed Henrietta, oh my god. I mean, just having Annie just be covered in a geyser of blood, nearly. That's just good god. And also when it comes to the film's humor, it does work extremely well, especially in the scene where Ash is like hallucinating every object in the cabin, just laughing hysterically at him, and he looks like he's having a ball. And I'm just like, yeah, that one scene is just like it's like the cabin got a major case of the giggles.
It's like the cabin is its own character.
Yeah, and it almost kind of feels like it is. Yeah, and of course, when it gets to the montage scene, that's easily the best scene in the movie. We see Ash putting a chainsaw on his stump, saws off the shotgun, and he is geared and ready for battle, and says his epic line, "Groovy." Fuck yeah. And how everything plays out at the end with the final battle between the possessed Henrietta and how they attempt to send the evil back through a rift through time. This also like builds tension, especially when Annie gets stabbed by Ash's possessed hand. And you're just like, oh my god, how are they ever gonna get out of this situation? And Ash is the only survivor now. I mean, because in these movies, mostly the first two movies, Ash is like the guy who survives in the end.
Yeah, he's the one survivor.
Yeah, so I mean, the evil force is sent through the time rift. And so is Ash, which also sets up the events of Army of Darkness, because he goes back to 1300 AD, and right when a bunch of knights are about to kill him because they believe he's a Deadite, they all retreat because they see a flying harpy flying towards them and ready to attack them, and then Ash kills them with a shotgun. And of course, the knights praise him as their hero. And of course, we get the final shot where Ash is just like, no, no. And then it cuts. And it's just like, yes, I mean, that was like the perfect way to set up Army of Darkness.
Yes.
Yeah. So Evil Dead 2 is a full-blown classic. I highly recommend it for anybody who is a fan of horror. It has the perfect mix of both the comedy and horror. Bruce Campbell is amazing. And even though some of the effects are flawed, I'm not going to downgrade it. It's still an awesome movie to watch. And I'm going to give Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn an A+. Oh, finally, I had a chance to review Evil Dead 2 on this channel, and
Yes.
honestly, I knew I could not do this without you guys, because mostly, I mean, we are a huge fan of Sam Raimi's work, and I love talking about Sam Raimi films with you guys. It's just, I felt like, I mean, we are back in
Yes.
business, and I miss doing collaborations with you guys, honestly. So what are your thoughts on Evil Dead 2? Let me know in the comment section below. And guys, thank you so much for joining me on this collaboration. And guys, thank you so much as always for watching. And I'm looking forward to continuing my 3rd annual Halloween special. And if you want my thoughts on old or new movies, of course, you know where to find me.